I'm so glad to be back. Today we've got some really exciting conversation going on, talking about bridging some gaps. You know, I got a general question that I'm gonna ask everybody before I go through the introduction. You know, are blacks really together? And are we together? And are we together politically? Are we together racially, religiously? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of gaps between blacks and other blacks. You know, there's just a whole lot of things that happen. One of the things I want to talk about today on this show, which I think is going to be a very interesting conversation, is that we're going to talk about the disparities in people actually getting out to vote. And I think that's a problem here in this country with black people. We just have not figured this thing out in a way that we should in order to get out and have a better turnout that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and start the introductions. One of our guests that we have, she's actually a really talented host for one of our shows, Night Dreams. So I want to introduce Africa to the conversation.
Hello, everyone.
How are you today?
Glad to be here. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Glad you came in today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me. I saw you Friday, didn't I? Yeah, I saw you Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and our next guest is a guy who's been with us since we kind of started here at this studio, here at this location. He's actually the former host of 80/20, which is Sports and More. I'd like to introduce Jabari to the scene.
Hey, how you doing? Good to be here.
Good to see you, man.
Good to be seen,
You
bro.
look a little taller. I don't know if that's me getting short or what.
Nah, just a little bit thinner, man.
A little thinner?
Yeah, this COVID got me out here walking with folks, so.
Oh, okay, I got you, man. I got you. And a brother who just showed up, who is also a talented host of Profit Propaganda. He just walked in, very talented, politically, financially inclined, and had some real deep stuff he's going to throw at us today. Joshua, what's up, man?
How's it going?
Glad you made it, bro.
Me too.
This guy's a last minute guy. Nobody's a last minute guy. This guy is. Okay, I'm gonna jump right into this conversation because voting. Now, what I have found out, just through some updates that I've done some research in the past couple of days, is that Texas has the lowest voter turnout. And I'm just curious why you guys think that is. Any comments? Anybody? How about you?
I'll jump in here. I think a lot of it has to do with, we have a lot of voters that are uneducated on the issues.
Okay.
I believe we also have a lot of voters that are obviously not registered.
Right.
And then I think also a big piece is transportation and logistics. And so when you start looking at where these polls are actually located,
Right.
you know, are the people actually able to get out to vote? You know, you look at a lot of, Texas it's a great republic.
Right.
You know, you have a lot of large cities,
Right.
And they're fourth in the nation, third in the nation, third and fourth in the nation, seventh in the nation, top 10 as far as population, but
Right.
you know, they're really spread out. And so if you look at Austin, look at Dallas, look at Fort Worth, look at Houston, you know, those are really large cities. And then you look at other rural
Right.
towns and municipalities, and they just don't have the means to get to the county seat where they have to go vote. So I think that really plays a large part
That's interesting.
in why we have such a low voter turnout.
It's become a generational thing almost. So you're saying that's been the issue?
I think that's part of it. There's so many other things,
Right.
but if you want to look at largest parts and pieces,
Right.
again, that's where I think we struggle as a state, and dare I say even as a nation, education, logistics, and transportation.
Right. So now, I think the governor had just mentioned something maybe a month or so ago that he's actually going to make it allow people who are concerned about coronavirus to actually do mail-in ballots.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that would help?
I think so, absolutely.
So now, I do know that you are a registered Republican.
That is correct.
And that could be a problem for the Republicans, couldn't it?
It could be, but I think what you're actually seeing is a changing within the Republican Party. You're seeing,
Oh, yeah, it's a change already.
well,
It's a massive change.
it has to be and recognizable. You know, I've been a Republican for 20 years.
Okay.
And that's just where I stand. It's kind of funny. I was talking to someone about that today, and they said, well, you're probably more of like a reverse Democrat. And I said, no, it's man, and I'll kind of explain that. But
Yeah.
what they're saying is the first time that I voted was in 1996, and I voted for Bill Clinton.
Okay.
Then I started doing my research. Then I started
That was the
looking.
first time I voted in 92. No, I was 92.
You're older than I am.
Oh, yeah.
You're old. But that's beside the point. But no, it was just the fact that I looked at what got me was NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and it wasn't really good for our community.
Right.
And for America. So when you start looking at, hey, we're going to move jobs outside of America to Mexico, particularly, and Canada, now you have cars, you have washing dryers, those types of things, that jobs we would normally do, now they're being moved down
But
to
it did
Mexico.
lower the cost of goods, though.
Okay, so now you can't work and you can't afford
I mean,
it.
well,
even though and we're talking about, when you say we lowered the cost, it lowered the cost of the goods, but if you don't have a job, it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah.
It doesn't matter.
See, you saying 96. I remember in 92, we still coming off of the Reaganomics
Yes.
of the 80s. And then, of course, George Bush kind of just carried that in. You know, there was a
The
lot of
trickle-down effect, yes.
Yeah. So it just, you're talking about 12 years of Republican-led administration.
Correct.
Which, to me, it was all one and the same. I mean, there were some differences. There were some things that Bush actually did that Reagan said he was going to do, but he never did.
Right.
Especially when it came to dealing with foreign invaders, pretty much. So, okay. So, Josh, you've been in Texas for a while. When was the first time you voted?
Last time I voted,
First time.
first and last time I voted
Oh, okay.
was, actually I think I voted twice.
Okay.
I voted once for Obama,
Okay.
and then I voted in the 2016 election.
Oh, okay. So, now I'm about to get a little controversial. Who did you vote for in 2016?
I didn't vote for Hillary.
So there's only one other candidate, so you voted for the other guy. Okay. Now, you and I had a conversation earlier part of last week, where you explained something to me, because I think through some conversation over the past couple of months when we were talking, I kind of pegged you as a Trump supporter. And you didn't actually, you're not really a Trump supporter, but you told me why you felt Trump being in office had some benefits.
Yeah.
So can you explain that?
Well, I don't know who else you could put into office to make it so blatantly clear that the system that we continue to foolishly rely on and think is going to, for some reason, change in our benefit is unsustainably broken and fractured.
Right.
So you put an entertainment mogul and as the face of the country and as the primary decision maker, and if Hillary had gotten into office, then it would have just allowed for that momentum of complacency that we already have in our community to continue, and so that when the shit hits the fan, we're caught by surprise.
Right.
Well, at least now you have a symbol that lets you know, hey, something is going wrong.
Right.
This is not for you. This system that was built that you continue to show up to the polls for and cry for white Jesus to come save you.
Right.
It's not for you, and white Jesus is not going to come save you. And so it should interrupt your comfortable method and habits of thinking and belief to start to question. All right, well, what is this? What really makes this system actually work?
Right.
He used the system against itself to put himself in the position that he's in now, because he knows how the system works.
Okay. You think that's going to happen in 2020?
He's going to win again. They're not. The other guy's not going to win.
Wow. So you're basing it on, it sounds like you're basing it on the hope, not on the same thing that he did in 2016.
No, it's not hope. It's just a fact. Okay, so you have somebody who literally is losing his ability to use his brain to the point where they're trying to keep him off of the media and make a fool of himself, versus Trump, who is so Trump, he's just good at roasting. And so it's not even about, people say, oh, he's not even a polished professional, he's not even a politician. Shut up. Most of the U.S. public doesn't care about all that fancy talk in the first place. The reason why he got into office is because he wasn't a politician. Okay. And so now he's coming out more and more that as a regular ass dude, and people don't like that. He's a regular ass dude who has a lot of money, and anybody who has a lot of money doesn't have to really give too many shits about what you think or how you feel. Right. He's going to say exactly what he wants. He's going to speak exactly how he feels. So we have somebody that's raw. Okay. And he's going to come off as raw on the people that come against him. And so you have this politician that is practiced, delivering their messages a certain way and their perspectives a certain way. All that shit goes out of the fan when you have somebody who's a complete wild card and who's throwing left and right hooks with their jokes and with their messages and with the things that they say and the way that they present their perspectives. Trump is a natural, he's a natural, what do you call it, roaster. He can roast people.
So you think that is what is going to win him the election in 2020? Everything you just mentioned, you believe that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm going to come, Africa, I'm going to get to you on this one, but I'm going to come back to you, Jabbar. Because I know you are a registered Republican.
Yes, sir.
So what are your thoughts on what he said?
Here's what I would say to that. The Republican Party as a whole knows how to win.
Yes.
And they played the game to win.
Right.
And that is where Democrats have failed.
Yep. I will agree.
When you talk about strategy, and that's where I really like to look at this, and especially from a social standpoint. Now, do I think Trump is a great person, this, that, and the other? No.
Right.
But everything that he stated, Josh stated, is correct. They play to win. You can say, look, we're going to have a base. This is our base. This guy eats McDonald's like you do. This guy doesn't like to work out like you don't, right? And yes, he has money. Doesn't matter where the money came from.
Right.
Just the fact that he has money. But look, he's just like you and me from that base. And so that base will be energized to say, see, that's the guy I want. Now, when you look at the Democratic Party, you have factions within the Democratic Party that cannot get together. And so when you have that, you look at that from that standpoint. You ask the question, who did you vote for? I always write in Colin Powell. I'm waiting on him. I'm waiting on you, Colin.
I would have been a Republican.
I'm waiting on you, General. But the key is that you have to know how to play the game. It does. When we get into this popularity contest, right? And we say, well, Hillary won by 3 million, but she lost electoral college, and you start to see eyes roll in the back of the head. Hey, that's the game.
Right.
That's how it works. And if you're not willing to understand that, then you are going to lose. If if I'm looking at it from a strategic standpoint, again, registered Republican, but if I'm looking at it from a strategic standpoint, Obama has 8 years, you then put Biden in for 4, you have a person that's young and up and coming in the Democratic Party that can carry that on, and now you have 8 plus 4 plus a possible another 4 to 8 years of Democratic leadership, but yet the Democrats are not able to look past their noses and say, oh, I need to go shake this hand and kiss this baby, and yeah, that's great and all, but you're going to lose with that.
There's been a lot of damage since the 2016 election, right? And while we're saying, I'm not going to totally disagree with what you're saying, Josh. I just don't see it. I don't see it because to me, it doesn't completely add up to what the people are seeing now. What the people have seen is the president become impeached, for one. I've never heard, and not saying it can't happen, because we never had a Trump in office either, never had a black president either. But for a president to be impeached, that's huge. That is huge. And even some Republicans, very conservative Republicans, take heed to that. This guy was impeached. Whether the Senate removed him or not, he was impeached. That is big. You can't deny that. And he's going to be that way forever. It's like having a felony. It won't escape you. You're always going to go down in history as the person that was impeached. As a matter of fact, he's number 3, right? Number 3 in the country since we started the union. That right there, one. But when he came into office, we know that he was supported by some outside influence that he allowed, and even some very conservative Republicans disagreed with it, even though they weren't voicing their opinions. See, what we're not hearing is the opposition from the Republicans. We're not hearing them say, oh, I don't like what he did. There was a couple of them squeaking out, coming out saying, oh, I'm in disagreement with what he did. But when it comes to the polls, I think, and I've heard just recently, that there are a lot of Republicans that will vote for Biden, or they just won't vote for Trump, period. They won't vote for anybody. So I think that almost 4 years, you know what I'm saying, I think it's had an impact. And then what just recently happened, people are looking at how he handled the coronavirus thing, right? Yeah, he probably didn't, give nobody the virus and start spreading it, but he prevented certain things from happening because he was still concerned with it being a Democratic ploy. These were his talking points back in January. The Democrats set this up. He's constantly blaming everybody else for something he was totally in control of, right? He was totally in control. Not only that, what just recently happened in Washington, D.C. last week, when he came out, and I know this right here kind of tipped the scale for a lot of people, because there are a lot of people, Democrats and Republicans, even independents, who are into this, protesting is something which this country is founded on. Protest. But when you set this thing, if you have to come out and do a photo op, these are people very conservative, very religious, who felt like, see, I'm not even concerned about the Democrats. I know where Democrats can go. My concern, my wonder is how many Republicans are going to turn against this guy. Because we know coming in, they weren't for him anyway. But they also didn't want Hillary in. Almost like what you were saying. They didn't want Hillary. They did not. But they were like, just give him a try. And everything was set up. He had the Senate and the Congress behind him. Because everybody's all, on one party. So all of a sudden now he wanted the White House as well. To me, that was a problem. Now here we are, almost 4 years later, where, okay, back in 2018, he lost the House, right? Now, a lot of things he wanted to do, he can't do it now. There's pushback, but he's still got them folks up in the Senate right now. There's push. Him and Mitch McConnell, which is a whole different conversation we probably we can dig into. But Mitch McConnell, to me, is more dangerous than the president, because he has power, he has authority, he has intelligence. He's the worst, the biggest enemy, in my opinion. He's right up there with Putin to me, but he's inside the walls. He's inside the walls making things happen. I can't remember hearing anything he's actually done for his state of Kentucky. Since he's been in the position he's in. Not saying being in the leadership of the Senate, since he's been in the Senate. He hasn't done anything to support it. He's always looked out for himself. This guy came in office a broke man, living off the Senate salary. Now he's a multi-billionaire because he's put things in place that supported him, cut his own taxes. He did all these things, and everybody else. It's something bigger than what we're seeing that's happening on the Republican side of the House. Yeah, it is a different Republican. It's definitely not Reagan's.
But surely he's the only one that does that, correct? No other senator, congressman.
No, there's several.
Okay.
There's several. No one else in the position he's in.
Listen, let me put it to you like this.
Yes,
and when we talk about winds of change and things of that nature, we talk about but Steve King. I don't know if you've heard this story about Steve King in Iowa, 9-year senator or 9-term senator there. A congressman there is out now. And a lot of people have said, well, it's because of the remarks that he's made and things like that. No, it's because President Trump, that president, stripped him of his committees, and so now he is no longer a necessity. He is no longer worth anything. So he lost.
Right.
He's out.
Right.
And his jurisdiction said, oh yeah, he can't do anything.
Right.
All he can do is vote. We need someone that has power within that House, right? Power within that Senate, power within that Congress. So what we have to realize as a voter, when you go to vote, one of the things that I was talking to with someone, they were one of the persons that were actually, a lot of people come in, they were checking and everything like that, right? He was noticing the division there when people would come in to vote, and he would notice Republicans would have, papers. They would have notes, whereas some of the Democrats would not.
Right.
What that tells me, and what we talked about, was do your research. Do you know who you're voting for? Do you know their platform? Absolutely. Do you know their voting history? Right. Do you know the propositions? A lot of times we get hung up on things that were propositions where we could have voted yes or no, but because we didn't know, we just hit straight Democratic ticket, right? And then we just put yes, 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 no, 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 tried to read it right then and there, trying to figure it out. What is that? Because the verbiage in the prop, a lot of times, you really have to dig in there and see what it's talking about. But you have to be learned. You have to educate yourself. If you don't know what that proposition is, ask somebody that you trust.
It's funny because somebody on a show here, maybe a couple weeks ago, saying that they felt that it's somebody else's responsibility to educate them on the candidates. And as a matter of fact, I think that person even mentioned, why don't we have a show where somebody can tell people who's the better candidates, you know what I'm saying? Because, I didn't understand, I just heard it, so I'm like, and I cringed. But that right there alone, because you just said, and I 100% agree with you that we need to educate ourselves on who these candidates are and what they stand for. Because we may not do a complete down ballot with Republican or Democrat.
Absolutely.
We need to figure out, because it might be somebody in the sheriff department, it might be the opposite, opposite party. We should maybe vote for it. And you got that option when you go to the polls here in Texas.
Absolutely.
It gives you the option when you do straight down, or you can do, So, Africa, are you a registered voter?
Yes, I am.
And can I ask you which way you vote?
Democrat.
Democrat. Okay, is there a reason why you vote Democrat?
Since I've been able to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have asked you, when was the first time you voted?
The first time I voted?
Yes, that's if you can remember that far back.
I don't remember.
I'm telling you, age a little bit.
I think it was 97, 98.
98? Was it for
90 maybe
Congress? Was it
2000.
a presidential election?
Yes.
Okay, so it might have been 96.
96.
Okay.
No.
So you voted for Clinton?
No, it had to be no, I don't remember back that far.
Okay.
So it had to be 96, so it had to be 2000.
So you voted for Gore?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Which
You're
was
taking me back a long time. My
20
childhood.
years.
Man, that was 20 years. I did not feel like 20 years ago.
It don't feel like 20 years ago, do it?
No.
But 20 years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you feel about the upcoming election? What are your thoughts on it?
The upcoming election, I do not think that Trump will win.
And why do you think he won't?
Trump has displayed, I have to piggyback some of the things that you said, that and Josh as well. He's real, but he is also a total idiot, in my opinion.
Okay.
I
I don't think no one here at the table denying that, right?
I mean, that's
Some might feel he's a genius in some ways, but
in some ways, the way he won the election, of course, but the way he has handled these last 4 years in our country has shown us to be proven that he's a total idiot. He has put out all this realness, but he has not done anything to make things better for the country. Everything has only gotten worse, in my opinion. And I really am not into politics, but here as of late, I have really dived in. I would just vote. Yes, I would just vote because you are always told to vote, because of women's rights to vote. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna vote. Not necessarily knowing who I'm going to vote for, but I'm going to vote. But at this point in life, the last time I voted was Obama's, I think it was 12? His second term. So I voted, since Gore, I only voted for Obama. I didn't vote for Bush or,
Well, I guess at that point it would have been Kerry, and after Gore, Kerry, then,
Yeah, so I didn't vote for either the son or the father. I skipped over that. I didn't vote again until Obama, the 2 times. At this point, I will definitely vote. I have recently been doing my studies on gerrymandering when it comes to voting.
Where you going with this? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, you're asking me a question, so
No,
I'm
you
kind
good.
of going off of my notes that I have.
You're good.
Just really learning how that works and knowing your districts and knowing your local voting. Like, if you know how to locally vote, then you'll know how to vote when it gets to the presidency. If you don't, if we're not educated on how to vote locally, then how can we possibly know who to vote for when it's time for the presidential election?
Right.
So I think that's what a lot of people fell off 4 years ago when they voted for Trump, is locally not knowing who to vote for. So when it got to the presidency, it's like, oh, I'm going to vote for him because he's telling the truth. He's really showing us that our country is really in shambles and we need somebody that can fix it. He can fix it. Since he's been here, the employment rate has continuously, it'll go up, but then it'll decline.
Well, actually, during his first couple, up until recently, unemployment was down to 4.3%, which is the lowest it's been in a long time, right? But we all know
They manipulate the numbers.
Well, I mean, there's some, but it's always been in it. Matter of fact, I just heard out the numbers that just came out last week was wrong because they said it dropped down to 13.3, but those numbers were wrong. So people from BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, actually said that those numbers were wrong, so it's still up in the 16%. So, and I heard some very important people come in and say that, they don't feel that the people with BLS is actually doing it on purpose. It was just an error. So we can debate that all day long. None of us here have proof that it was or was not. So let's take the benefit of the doubt that people being honest, it was just an error. They admitted that it was one. So with those numbers, as far as unemployment, unemployment can win or lose an election. It can. Just like the economy. And we know that's what happened with the first Bush, right? Because the economy. Clinton came with a plan and said, I'm going to fix all this, which he really did because under his administration, the 8 years he was there, We had a deficit. You know, I'm sorry, we had a surplus of over $200 million surplus, which has never been done since the last term of Roosevelt, I think. You know, under the New Deal. But anyway,
Bush did pretty well. W did pretty well.
There was never a surplus. Are you talking about a budget? We've had budget deficits. The only time we supposedly had a surplus in the second half of the 1900s was when Clinton was in office.
Right.
And even that, if it was actually adjusted to inflation, it's not a surplus. So all that stuff is just bullshit.
Right. Okay. So, and matter of fact, before we get to this, go back to the gerrymandering thing. So Texas is one of the most gerrymandered states in the union.
What is gerrymandering anyway?
It's the term they call it was cracking and packing.
What does that mean?
So in other words, if you have a district that is, or it depends on who's doing the gerrymandering, right? So if there's a Republican district, if there's a district where it's 60% Democrat, 40% Republican, and maybe some independents mixed up in there, right? So what they'll do is redistrict those people within certain groups, and they'll move them over to where it looks like these people are actually part of this group. So when people vote, and this has happened a lot in the Midwest.
And they also call it redlining.
Yeah, redlining. Well, redlining is with real estate.
That's real estate though.
But gerrymandering,
It kind of falls into that same piece.
Well, they would redline the same way.
Yes.
Through the redistricting, right?
Yes.
So certain zip codes, certain things like that. And
Correct.
yeah, it is done the same way.
Yes.
It's pretty complicated, but it requires some people who understand what they're doing. And I got to give credit to the Republicans because they were smart enough to figure out how to do it and do it within the law, you know. But then laws are changing now.
Laws are changing, but I mean, it goes back to my point.
Yeah.
You know, you're sitting here playing checkers,
Right.
and this is a game of chess. If you want to win the vote, if you want to win within that district,
Right.
you need to have those that understand. You can't just have your friend running,
Right.
and they don't have an idea of what's going on.
Right.
It's cool. You can go out, you can pass out flyers and put in, pickets, and all, that's great. But if they don't understand how this works,
Right.
don't be upset when they don't win.
Right.
You know, and so that big piece and that big point, and when we talk about gerrymandering, it is so vital and important, and that's why I'm going to get on this kick. You know, the census is so important,
Yep.
and therefore you can actually understand there's a real count. And people say, well, it doesn't mean anything. We're not going to get any money from it, but you actually do. You get services. Again,
Right.
those logistics that we talk
that's
about.
important, yeah.
That now creates a bus stop where you are. That's what the census does.
Right.
So instead of you saying, I got to get a ride for my friend,
Right.
now the T will come pick you up, David. But you have to do that. But we also, as a community, have to be able to provide those tools and resources for them.
Right.
So if you can't do it on your phone, but you need a laptop, hey, we can come and help you.
Interesting.
Go ahead and open that mailer up, fill
Right.
it out, turn it back in.
Interesting. So I'm going to change the topic just a little bit. There was a poll that came out this morning, Wall Street Journal and NBC poll, right? These are pretty prestigious polls. Okay. What they're saying is 83% of registered voters, right, in the U.S. feels that the U.S. is out of control, completely out of control. 57% of those are whites, 63% are Latino, and 91% of that, 83%, are black. Some of these polls also stated that they're more concerned with the George Floyd murder than the actual protests and the riots, which is really what this whole thing is about, right? So while some people are still, I don't have that number, but I should put it in here. There's another number that showed how many people were concerned about the riots over that. While 72% of voters between the ages of 45 and 75, which is actually my group, are more concerned about the continued spread of COVID-19. So I guess that makes sense between 45 and 75-year-olds as we end up in years. Do you guys feel the country's out of control?
Yeah. Well, it's not even a control thing. This is a cyclical aspect of power structure. So
Okay.
just throughout history, power shifts happen.
Right.
And so there's, just like I talked about this a couple of times on a couple of shows, where on average every 50, conservatively speaking, every 50 or so years, we see a significant change
Right.
in financial
I remember
systems.
you talking about that, yeah.
Right? So with power structures, typically if there's a nation that is in power, every 500 years the pendulum swings. And so we've kind of we've seen the great times of the United States or the Western ideology.
Right.
And that's what I mean by power structure. The Western ideology has been in power for about 500 years,
Mm-hmm.
And so we see that pendulum, the influence that it has on the mindsets of people is starting to lose its grip.
Mm-hmm.
And so people recognizing that, okay, especially more than any other population, this is a personal frustration with me, but more than any other population, the black population should be the ones that are making the biggest adjustments to how we manage our thought processes.
Okay.
With the country, yes, we are about to lose our international influence because, like him or hate him, Trump. No, this system itself has been flawed for a long time.
Okay.
Trump is bringing to the surface its flaws and making it more obvious. That's all he is.
But isn't his job to make it better?
He can't make. He's a scapegoat. Okay, he's a scapegoat who's been given the mall cop or the what do you call it? The hall pass.
Right.
The hall pass badge, and he's taking his job a little bit too seriously. He believes that he can actually do something when he really has little to no power.
It's funny how you say that because you almost get excusing incompetence.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Let me clarify.
Okay.
We continue to think that a president is going to care about our collective issue within the black community, which is a stupid thing to do.
Okay.
It's foolish and it hasn't gotten us anywhere,
Right.
period.
Well,
So
look, explain that. What do you mean don't care?
we still get murdered. We still get murdered on a regular scheduled
Right.
basis.
Right.
Think about the imagery that you see all over social media.
Right.
I have yet to see a black champion anywhere. It paints us as these victims and we're losers.
Right.
We're painted that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, well, let's talk about voting. Well, we need to get a Democrat on. When's the last time a Democrat has actually materially helped any community or any of our communities? We have to take the expectation for somebody outside of us to do something for us and bring that back inside of us.
I get what you're saying.
So I drew this very elegant piece of artwork. It took me a lot of time. And what this shows is a clock.
Yes, sir.
And so we're like, oh man, the time is off. The time is off.
Right.
The system is broken. Everything's not working. We got to get out there and adjust the hands.
Right.
But we haven't addressed the gears that determine how the clock ticks.
Right.
And so we have to look at the gears within the clock and the different gears that are, the legal system
Right.
and the education system. The reason why nobody knows anything is because the education system, it feeds worthless or very inefficient information. So while we're sitting there putting all this energy and this brain power into processing things that shouldn't take any time at all, we're missing out on all these other aspects. So you have to address the gear within the system. Not going to the poll and voting for another hand
Right.
to be in place is not going to fix it. As a matter of fact, because of how butthurt people are right now with things not going the way they supposedly should or have been advertised,
Right.
If Trump doesn't get elected this time, which it can happen, there's going to be a major and overreaction shift to the left.
Right.
That is not good for anybody.
That's not good. You're right.
That's not good for anybody.
Absolutely.
And so whenever the extreme left person gets in, whether it's demented Biden or whoever takes his place whenever he passes away, whenever he loses the
He
next
only
election,
promised to do one term anyway. He already said.
it's because he's not going to live that long. He's going to die pretty soon. And so hey, it is what it is. I don't care. So whenever he dies, if he gets into election, there's going to be a major strain to it. So that whole Democratic thing and the whole freedom of speech and the whole blah blah blah, the multiple violations of the Constitution are being brought to the surface left and right. So people are like, well, why am I going to have to follow the law if the people who made the law aren't following the law?
So we talking about bridging the gap now. You just mentioned some really good stuff, but what's the alternative?
The alternative is to take the idea of government and learn to govern yourself first.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if your system within your mental, your habits and your behaviors and all that stuff, if you don't know how to operate and govern yourself,
Right.
if you don't know how to feed yourself and find your food, fund yourself and find your funds,
Right.
create value, if you don't know how to do that, you are seen as a liability. You are looked at as 3/5 of a person.
Absolutely.
And so this is how we're painted as.
Right.
And the worst part of it is that we have two sides that are painting us as these 3/5 ass people. You have the external factors. Oh, they're not producing anything. They're not worth saving.
And the rest
Kill
of
them
us
off.
doing ourselves.
Right.
Ourselves.
Yeah, getting rid. Yeah, we have ourselves feeding into the same ideology.
Right.
That is suicidal.
Right.
That is suicidal. So that has to, for the folks. There's I don't remember what verse this was in the Bible, but it was basically saying that let those who don't want help and don't care to help themselves, let them go.
Right.
And so you have this population, this cancerous population within the black population that either refuses to or doesn't even know to understand and look at themselves as, hey, these are issues that I have personally within my household that I need to address.
Right.
And instead you say, oh, well, white Jesus needs to come and save us from my problems.
Right.
That's like me and her having an issue and going to you guys and expecting y'all to help me fix our problems, or lonely ass Cheryl who can't find a man, giving advice to married Bethany who is having trouble with the husband. You're taking your information from the wrong source is what I'm basically saying. You have to take responsibility and be accountable to what you say you want. And if you want those things, you have to be willing to put in the work and the time and the effort to acquire those things yourself within your tight-knit circle, which is connected to another circle that's tight-knit within your community. But all that presidential and the nomination and the this and the that, that's way outside your circle.
It is. It is.
So that would be...
So there's still a huge gap in disparity, right, between us and the rest of the population. I mean, black people and the rest of the population. How do we bridge that gap? I mean, I personally feel there are things, well, let me just say this. Some of us in this room feel that separation is the easiest method, right? Separation, isolation, blacks should all be in one area. Somebody even said on the show that everybody should just move to Texas and everybody else move out, and we sit here and build a nation within Texas of black people, right? I totally disagree with that. I don't think it can work, and there's a lot of, not saying that, I don't think it could work today, not in our generation. Is it possible that it can work? Yeah, because we'll have our own problems and have to figure out how to solve them. It's almost like what Gandhi did when he was in India. They were Pakistanis and they were Hindu all under the same roof, and all of a sudden Europeans come in and play on both sides of the field. They became the mediator, where they became, both of these cultures became dependent on them when they didn't have cause of a problem in division. So I agree with the segregation to a certain extent, that to be our problems, we can figure it out. But are we really capable of doing that today?
I'd say yes.
You think yes today?
But
Okay.
this is what it's going to require, because this is going to happen anyway.
Okay.
There will be a trauma that we haven't even seen yet. We just got started with all this stuff.
Okay.
With the COVID or the murder hornets, every month has been a new highlight, right?
Yeah.
So what's happening right now is that teat that we've been holding on so tight has been feeding us poisonous milk. Some of us are finally detaching from it and looking at the wrinkly titty and seeing
Right.
that this is not feeding us the nourishment that we need.
Right.
So we need to find another source of nourishment.
Mhm.
It's not realistic to expect that you're going to get a whole bunch of people to move into one place and do all that kind of stuff, because if your mindset and your heart are still where it was before you left, then you're still going to carry on the same behaviors that you did before. So what needs to happen, just like think beyond all of the labels that we use to determine who's in charge, and think about it from a thinking standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
The Western ideology is what is in power, and so in order to change or adjust or fix or improve your life in relation to an ideology that's in power,
Right.
you have to identify the value structure of that ideology. And so what does the Western culture depend on for its survival of this paradigm that has been in power for so long? Well, then you have to look at what supports the paradigm. All right, well, we have the banking system.
Right.
We have the legal system.
Right.
We have the military system.
Mm-hmm.
We have the presidential system. Well, what allows for all of those things to work? Well, if we go into looking at, and then we have the educational system. All of those things are not run efficiently based on what we would consider to be valuable, because we're not included in the value part of it. We're included in the dead weight liability part of it.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, well, that means that this is not the only ideology that exists.
Mm-hmm.
If it is, then we might as well go ahead and kill ourselves right now.
Right.
So if we're not committed to the suicide, then we have to say, all right, well then, what other values exist? What things produce real value? What thought processes, what habits produce real value?
Right.
Because this system doesn't produce real value. It depends on the promise of value.
Right.
It never delivers it.
Okay.
Every president that's come into office promises value. Trump, he even accurately said, this market is in a big fat ugly bubble, and if interest rates go up even a little bit, it's going to come crashing down. That's exactly what he said. That's what got him into his position. He promised value. He didn't deliver it. The banking system
Right.
promises value. He take the certificates of its value and believe that it's value, but it's not.
Okay.
And so that's the disparity. Is not in the who's in power and blah, blah, blah. It's the ideology. We cannot, as a black population, expect anything different as far as our circumstance if we do not change our collective ideology.
I'll agree with that.
Go ahead.
To an extent, because there is history that shows us that we do show and have had value within this country. If for nothing else, we built it on our backs, blood, sweat, and tears. But also, I point to the Tulsa massacre. But when you look at that and see how in the early 1900s, where a group of black persons and peoples and community was able to, it was actually estimated that they were the richest part of the country at that time.
Right.
And so because of jealousy, because of things like that, it came down. I joke that there's 3 ways you can get out of this if you're a black person. Number 1, you can become an astronaut. And maybe you can get on a ship and go to SpaceX.
Okay.
Right?
We didn't want to take those problems in space. That's all.
It's only
Same
5.
thing.
Well, it's only 5 of them. So if you're the bigger, better one, then go for it.
Okay.
And I joke about that, but the other part was moving to Liberia, moving to Africa, moving to certain parts and places where, it's funny, back in 1997, 98, 99, I really got into Marcus Garvey.
Right.
And if you know the history of Marcus Garvey back in the early 1900s, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, he was actually advocating that we move back to Africa, had the
Right.
Black Star Line, and because of things that were done through the government, right, he was actually found fraudulent and was deported back to Jamaica because, and check this, he was taking investments for a ship that he had not purchased yet. That's amazing that's why you would go and get deported, because
I
you're
didn't know
taking,
that piece of it.
yes.
Yeah.
So that's why, and it was based upon the FBI actually infiltrating with a person within his organization to say, hey, he's collecting funds to purchase something he doesn't have. So when you think about this in this 2020, and say, wait a minute, that's what investment is. That's how you invest in businesses, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But back in those days, this is how we're going to get them. And that's how they got the mafia. It wasn't through all the killings and all, it was through, fraud, right? And wire fraud and things like that. So when you talk about how we are able to bridge that gap and to move forward, I got a statistic that, basically we're 14% of this nation. I think it's actually a little bit higher. But when you start looking at that and looking at our community being such a great consumer, which we are,
Right.
and you look at protests around the world, one of the things that comes to me, and I love history, is when you look at Germany, look at how they've thrived, but they had such an ugly stain on their nation through Nazism. But if you were to go to Germany, you would have no idea that it existed.
Right.
If you were to talk to people like Dirk Nowitzki who came up in that, and you ask him, hey, can you tell me about, what it's like to live in the area? And he would say, I really don't know anything about it.
So why is it that, let me ask you that, because that's a good point, because they had an ugly stain because of Nazis and a lot of things that's happened. And then of course there was invasion, how they invaded Russia and all those other things that were happening throughout history, throughout the 20th century, But when you come to America, there's a stain that's been there for over 200 years. And when you come here, you can see it.
Longer.
I'm saying, no, I'm not saying from the beginning of slavery. I'm saying since the people are actually talking about it and actually can interact with other people.
Gotcha.
So what I'm saying is that people come here and they see it, and it's evident that there's a problem.
Street names, school names, monuments are dedicated to these persons who, for all intents and purposes, were terrorists. Right? So when we look at that, and I need to qualify and quantify that, yes, I'm a Republican. I consider myself a Frederick Douglass Republican or a Lincoln Republican, because let's be clear,
Let me take this call real quick.
Go ahead.
You're on the air with the people. Question or comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to listen to the stream.
Okay.
Sorry.
Man, I lost my train of thought. But what was I talking about?
You're saying Frederick Douglass,
Lincoln.
Lincoln
So, and Daddy King was a Republican. And the reason why he switched over was because Kennedy came, and Kennedy was a Democrat at that time, and they were known as Dixiecrats, came to MLK Jr.'s cell and talked to him, and he said, that's the man.
Right.
That's when you start to see a change in our political landscape. And there was a deal that was made. So, we talk about history, we talk about what that is, and what does it mean to be a Democrat and a Republican. And remember, this is a two-party system.
Right.
That is the way it was set up.
Right.
The Electoral College was set up so that there would not be a popularity contest.
Right.
So you don't have
Based on
Republicans.
system fairness.
Right. So because you have the state of Texas that has more people than most, in California, and those states, right, in New York, they don't control necessarily the whole election. That's why it was set up. Again, understand what this means. Now with gerrymandering, and to kind of circle back around, you have to understand the game that's happening.
Right.
And so if you're seeing this, the president only affects that little corner of what he has.
Right.
You have to look at your local officials, see who your state representative is, your councilman is, who are the council person, who's sitting on your school board.
Right.
Because they make the decisions about your education for your kids. Right? They're the ones that are saying, hey, we're going to have this book. We're going to teach social studies and history from the Confederate side.
Right.
Because that's what's happening in our schools. I don't know if you know that, but that's how social studies is taught.
Right.
And we're talking about from the 8th grade level.
Right.
These are 13 and 14-year-olds. So when you have that imbalance, then yes, you have to make sure that you are doing those things as a citizen, right? That you are competent to make those decisions. Otherwise, if you say it don't mean nothing for me to vote, I'm just one vote, you're right. You are just one vote, but that is one more than zero.
Actually, I have an idea. This would be an actual practical way to make this.
So you all do agree that the voting is important?
Absolutely.
And it matters?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All you got?
I'm struggling on it, but with my invention, I think it'll help. So
okay, go ahead. Let's hear your invention.
It's actually really easy. All you do is, just like you get updates for Twitter stuff and the YouTube stuff that you're subscribed to or whatever, all that would need to be done is you create an app that goes into everybody's phone, okay? And this is the voting app. This goes on a local level, this goes on a state level, blah, blah, blah. And it goes by it can go by the category for what that person that is trying to get in office can make the most influence by, or it advertises to make the most influence
So
by.
there's a lot of AI involved with this.
This could be AI, it doesn't necessarily have to be. This could be just a regular database. Hey, as a politician, I'm going to go, I want to be voted into office for this area, and I sign my name on the thing, and it registers me into this into the Vote Me In app. That's what it's called. Vote Me In.
Okay.
All right, so the Vote Me In app, everybody who is in that area is notified, hey, you got an election. Who do you want to go in? Such and such, he has this for sale, while such and such has that for sale. Pick one. That way you at least know there's a vote coming up, because most people, I know I don't know when state and local level stuff is coming up.
Right.
And I really don't care because it's not in front of my face. But if I get a notification that such and such is going to get into office in my area, who's about to make these decisions that can affect my pocket this way and my lifestyle this way,
Right.
I'm going to pay attention because I'm subscribed to it. Everybody's connected to their phone.
Right. Let me say this. That's great. There's a website called Texas.gov. They will let you know what district you're in based on your zip code, and you can actually see the candidates and the propositions that are there. And you can click right on it, and it'll take
So
you
that's
right to
like a prototype of what you're talking about.
Yeah, we would
I've
take the
seen
data.
that too. I've seen that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the data from Texas. Texas what?
Texas.gov.
Texas.gov. So Texas.gov, Missouri.gov, New York.gov, all them govs.
Right.
They put their data into this database for this app so that whatever your zip code that your phone is linked on gets the notifications. You don't even have to go.
And each one of these candidates' bio, what they stand for, their
Texas.gov.
is not there. It's all there.
Right.
So I mean, that's a great idea, and I love it. But to that point, we have to be able to go out and get the knowledge. And I've said this to several people. You're asking for a group, a community of people to say, I'm going to give up my power to you. That's like a king saying, and think about Lion King. That's like saying Mufasa saying to Scar, hey, check it out, Scar.
Right.
I know you bad. I know you're not a good guy, a leader, whatever. But I'm going to give you half of everything. Just because you right here. I'm just going to give you half of it.
Right.
Now, thinking from a personal standpoint, we as human beings are not going to do that. Right? It's easy to give up half of $1, but if someone says, hey, can you give me half of that 10,000 you just got?
Right.
Can you give up half of that 100,000 you just got? Can you give up half of your nation?
We got some nice sound effects in this. So
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, but I mean, it comes to the point of, just like you said, Josh, police your house, right? Get into your house, and I use that term very loosely, but get into your house, make sure it's right, get your foundation straight. And then from there, move out, right? Move to your friends and family and loved ones. Make sure they understand the issues. No, it's not necessarily, up to us, but it is up to us. If we're not going to do it,
each one of us have a responsibility.
If they're counting.
Now, say it was a requirement that every person who is classified a U.S. citizen above the age of 18 had to vote.
You can't do that.
No, I'm just saying.
You can't. You can't even say that because that's your constitutional right not to vote.
It's not, you don't have.
But I'm saying, I'm using a hypothetical in this.
I understand, but
if there was a law saying that you have to vote, if not, you could be fined.
So check this out. In Germany and Austria, at the age of 18, you have to go into civil service. There's no question.
That was practiced here in the States too. I mean, I had to do it when I was 19.
Today, no. When I say go, I'm not talking about you can be drafted. No,
right.
You're in.
Right.
So you're either going to be a civil servant or you're going to be in the military for 2 years,
Gotcha.
regardless,
I see.
male or female.
I see.
That's the rule. That's the law. That's what you're going to do. Now you put that to Americans, man. You about to have hell on water. I'm telling you for real, right? It's going to be smoke in the city, but that. And so, we have to really understand what that means. You have the right to vote and the right not to vote, but they're banking on you not voting.
Well, some people.
The system just call it the quotation marks. It thrives off of ignorance. It thrives off of it.
More than anything.
More than anything. And so we get mad about exercising our ignorance because we're not getting the results from exercising knowledge.
Right.
And so
it's not instantaneous. Right.
It's not. Yeah. So at least the idea. I'm just throwing stuff out there. At least the idea. The reason why we buy the way that the reason why we are so heavily into consumption is because consumption and its benefits or proposed benefits have been thrown in our face daily, all the time. Phone, TV, community, friends. We're all under that consumptive mindset. The consumptive mindset was not popular for even 100 years. It's not even been in power for that long.
Right.
And so if you're throwing it in, it wouldn't even take a generation. It would just take a few years to adjust it in people's mind to where it's a part of, it's a subconscious strategy.
Right.
This would be a subconscious strategy to constantly put it into people's face that this information that you have in front of you is valuable. It comes up regularly.
Right.
And this is a decision that you have the power to make. You don't have to click either one of these two buttons. You get Amber Alerts. You don't have to respond to the text messages and look for that license plate, but you got the message. You know that there's somebody that's in your community that can actually have an influence on the way you get to live your life.
I think something may come to that at some point. I mean, I can't say it's going to be in my lifetime, but I think something like that, I mean, because just that thought, you're the first person I've heard something similar, heard that from, around your age group. So there's a possibility that could happen at some time in the future. But, because we're running out of time, what I want to do is, and Africa, believe me, I'm about to get you involved, right? So I'm not going to have you hanging out here. But I have a question for all of you. There's something all three of you have in common. Each one of you have sons, okay? And based on what's been happening over the past couple of weeks, and this is not new, because we went through the same thing in just 6 years ago, pretty much. 6 years ago with all the killing of black men by police officers. But all three of you have sons, something I don't share, right? Now, I'm going to start with you because I did meet your son, 15. What is some of your concerns with your son today, growing up in this society, based on what just recently happened, what has been happening over the past decades of black men being murdered by police officers? Because we already have an enemy. We're each other's enemy, for one. I mean, somebody put out on Facebook the other day, Black Lives Matter, what happened to the blacks killing blacks? What does that mean? I thought that was profound. So, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, I'm concerned. He's 15 and I also have a 22-year-old son.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I'm extremely concerned. Concerned to the extent of, don't work, just stay home. Don't go to school.
Wow.
I'll homeschool.
Right.
And that's not good.
Well, a 22-year-old.
Well, he has
some type of graduate.
Yeah, of course. He's has to work.
Right.
But the 15-year-old wants to work, and it's like, no, just stay home. I'll take care of you. Just go to school, and I'll figure out how to homeschool.
Right. But that's not a solution.
It's not a solution. I'm just saying, as a mother, that is where I am, and peers of mine are in the same position with their sons. Like, don't go outside, and we can't do that to them. This generation is tired. I think that's why we see the protest the way that we see it. It's a lot more violent than it has been in the past. Well, it's been violent.
Well, it's okay. Go ahead.
This generation is different. It's like the respect level is not there.
Right.
And I can somewhat sympathize with them because they don't feel respected. Like they're entitled to respect to an extent, as children and as young adults and as grown men. And as a black man, our black kings are not respected.
Right.
And they're just tired. The solution is this. I don't know.
I mean, it's pretty complex. So,
yeah.
This police brutality thing has been going back. I mean,
Years.
way back.
Yeah.
Been heavily documented coming through the 60s and through the civil rights movement, this police brutality. But it's been, so we talking about 40, 50 years. Pretty much all my life. You know what I mean? So with that alone, but yeah, I agree with you that this generation is taking a stand on it, but there's some other elements that's contributing to some of the anger and frustration right now, and the awareness right now is because everybody's locked down.
Right.
So they don't have the other distractions because just a few years ago when Eric Garner was killed by the same method, except it was a hand around the neck instead of a foot around the neck, that everybody was busy doing other things. So you did see a lot of other races coming out to support the marches and stuff like that, but not like this. So no one is actually too busy to do something now, right, to protest. So I'm going to pass the same question over to you, Jabari, because you have a 15-year-old as well, right?
So I have a 13-year-old daughter, but I have a 4-year-old son.
Oh, okay. Got you. Okay.
So I want to put things in a little bit in perspective, if I may.
Okay.
Think about this. In this generation, when we talk about a generation, we're talking about basically, 0 to 18. They have known police brutality in social media their whole lives, starting with Trayvon Martin in 2012. Right? So they've grown up with this. We've grown up with it, right? This started way before the 50s, 60s, 40s, 30s, 20s. Police force in America was, was founded upon that to go and get slaves. Let's just call it what it is, right? So raising a 4-year-old that
I was
have...
thinking of the documentation of it,
Right.
somewhere, because before the civil rights movement, it was a crime, but...
Right. Was it really? Right, yeah.
Okay.
As far as America saw it.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
As far as America
Yes.
saw it.
Yes.
And of course, obviously there's no photographic
Right.
or video or anything like that.
Right.
Raising a 4-year-old who is very opinionated, it is growing up in a society, in a community where he wants to be heard and is telling you, I don't like this,
Right.
and I don't want to,
Right.
and expressing himself. He's yelling. Let me just call it.
Right.
He's yelling. And me as an African American, as a black man, to say, you can't do this.
Right.
If you're out in society and community, you cannot act this way. So it's trying to do that now at 4. That way at 15, I'm not worried about him going outside and getting a job, because that is a fear of mine.
Right.
Right? That is a real fear that he will be stopped and he's going to say something, do something, act a certain way that peace officer, that law enforcement officer is not going to like.
Right.
Whatever the case may be. And the problem is that a bad day for them is life or death.
Right.
So it's always on my heart. I think about it every single day. I really can't tell you there's not a moment that I'm not thinking about it.
Right.
And he's 4.
Right.
So it's very scary. What's the solution? To continue to educate, to continue to say, look, and correct him.
Right.
And say, this is why, and give him those tools to say, don't do this because, right? But I'm also wanting him to understand his rules, rights, and liberties within this country and within this world,
Right.
as a human being.
I think that's the biggest part right there, learning. Josh, you have a 1-year-old.
Yep. Well, first of all, I'm extremely grateful of how I was raised. And of course, hindsight being 20/20, I'm like, okay, well, these are some things that could have been done differently, and maybe I could have been taught more about this and that. But one of the things that I was raised on, like a foundation of the power of your decisions. And my mom really drilled that into us.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing, is I would definitely ingrain that in him of the power of his decisions. And I would also talk about the power of fear, abundance, fearlessness, whatever. These are vibrational influences that will influence your ability to make your decisions. And so, unfortunately, within the black community, we've had fear just mass produced, and that lowers your level of intelligence.
Right.
That lowers your ability to make decisions with clarity.
Right.
And so I would really focus, and one thing I plan on focusing on with Easy is teaching them how the systems work. Hey, well, yeah, when you get older, you're going to be in this world, and this is the way that this piece of the gear works.
Right.
I'll probably show him something real simple that he's obsessed with, to use his little basketball or teddy bear or whatever, but I would take that and break it down into certain segments of that teddy bear or whatever it is.
Right.
That says, okay, well, this is, it says it's meant to be fluffy, but you have to understand the cotton. Where does the cotton come from? The cotton is made from this place, and it takes, so he would understand the surface, what's going on the surface, and then, like I said, the mechanism under the surface that makes it look like the way it looks. So that way, when he goes in front of XYZ police officer, his body doesn't respond with fear, because he understands, all right, well, my life could be in danger. The way that I make my decisions is going to be very important. With my words, with my reactions, with my reflections, and so on. It's going to be very important in front of this guy.
See, now, look, I had a dad. I had dad figures in my life, But I'm going to come back to you right now, because you have 2 sons that are at that targeted age. You know what I mean? The 15-year-old and 22-year-old, right? And they're black men, right? I don't know if they're, boy, your son seems tall. When I met, he's kind of tall for 15. He's pretty tall. But it's something about this thing about big men, big black men that seems to be a threat to these white cops, or just cops, period. However, there's something happening through this protest, right? And I just heard on the news, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday, where there's a lot of changes in policies across the country with different districts and police departments that are changing their methodologies, right? Because there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of tension on it. My only concern is, you know, and like I said, I don't have the kids, but my only concern is that, you know, throughout this change, I mean, I think there's going to be more sacrifices. There really is. Because when the change comes, there's going to be some resistance. There is resistance to the cops, period. It already exists. But there's also going to be resistance, more resistance when the changes start to come. Because there can be some cops that's going to be resistant to that change as well. So I think that, you know, having a 21 to 15-year-old, you know, you don't have, you know, well, I'm not saying, you know, because I'm not going to do your personal life, but, you know, do you have the benefit of having a male that's going to give them the same message that these two men are giving to their sons, you know what I mean? And, you know, I understand you want to tuck them in and hide them in a house and don't go nowhere, you know. We know that's not going to work. It's not even realistic, you know, because he's going to find a way to get out of each other. So do you feel that, you know, with this, or do you want him to be a part of the change? You know, maybe it can start a paradigm now by teaching them to be a part of the change, be a part of the solution, not the problem. Because I've seen with a lot of these killings, there's been some level of resistance, you know, and now the resistance gotten so menial that we can just say, ask that question, why'd you pull me over? They feeling threatened by that, which is something I always ask. Right. You know, why are you pulling me over? If they don't volunteer to tell me at first. Now, I know since I've been in Bentango, a few times I've been pulled over. First thing, I pulled you over because. Right. I was like, oh. So I have an opportunity to dispute it, or I can say, okay, well, all right. Then I'm going along with it. Right. But that ain't happening all across the country. No, it's not. It's not. So that cop is already pulled up. Once he read your tags, whether you got warrants or not, he's already upset because you don't know how many people he had to talk before he got to you. So he's already hyped. He's already tense. And then it's dark. You know, all you got is a flashlight. You can see in your vehicles. A lot of things going on. There's a lot of things that are going on. So I guess I'm asking you, what type of message would you tell your two sons on dealing with this situation today?
What my older son and I, we talk a lot about it, and he's wanting to be a Black Panther. So he's kind of taking his
What does that mean to be a Black Panther? I mean, I know what it means, but what is it today?
For him, he is becoming very radical and very pro learning who he is and learning his culture. Okay. A lot of this generation, they don't know what their culture is. It's not very much of one outside of what we've taught them at home. Okay. I do have a mate that knows and talks with them, right, and, you know, try to teach them what I can't teach them, right, outside of their biological fathers. My 22-year-old, I can recall we were stopped by the police about 6 months ago. He worked at night. I was picking him up like 2 o'clock in the morning. And the first thing that my child did was he took his hands and he laid them on top of the dashboard. And the cop came on my side of the car. It was for a tail light. Right. And there was a black cop and a white cop. And the black cop immediately told him, move your hands, son. You don't have to do that. So for him, that was a very profound moment. Right. Because the white cop looked at him like, really? Did you just tell him to do that? And he was like, yeah, man, he doesn't have to put his hands on the dashboard. She got a busted tail light. Like, right, what is this? So he's learning. Well, my 15-year-old, I think he is fearful, and I don't want him to be fearful. Right. So at this time, I'm trying to coach him into, 15-year-olds, they've been in the house since March, so all they're doing is playing a video game. Right. And trying to push and instill in him, hey son, read this article. Watch this on television.
And then at some point, he's going to have a driver's license.
Exactly. And he's going to have to do the same.
So probably the next couple of years.
Thing. Correct.
So he's next.
Exactly. So he's seeing, he's watching. This George Floyd, I think, has definitely awakened him, has woken him up. He was alive when Trayvon Martin died, but he was very young. Right. So he's going back and looking at all the people that have died since he's been old enough to understand. And he came to me, he was like, Mom, I just watched another situation like George Floyd happen again. Right. It's not getting a lot of publicity because it's overwhelmed with what we have going on right now. And he's just at that point to where he's fearful, but I'm trying to figure out how to bring him out of being that fear and knowing that he is a young black king, and he has just as much right as anyone else of any other ethnicity.
Right.
I would have a solution / response to
Okay.
that. I was thinking as you were speaking, and I was also thinking about a couple of conversations I've had recently with myself and then with other people. And one thing I mentioned a little bit earlier on the show was imagery.
Right.
The imagery that is mass produced. First off, you have to recognize that there is intention behind the imagery that you see on social media. Okay? And so you have to, I naturally always wonder. I can't stop wondering why stuff is. And so I just research it a little bit and come up with my own conclusions. And so there's this man that I've spoken about a long time ago, Eddie Bernays. He was a master. He was a master in perception management. It was called public relations back then. But he was able to help a company advertise in such a way where it shifted the perception of the mass population for that company and for the product that the company was selling. Well, our perception currently is, stay in fear. Like I said, fear does lower your intelligence.
Right.
Period. Okay? So if you are filled with fear and then cop comes up on you and pulls you over, you're going to get shot because you don't know how to respond intelligently. You're responding based off of fear. You're inviting an energy.
Well, I think it's emotional intelligence that comes into play.
It's
Because fear is an emotion.
Generally speaking, fear lowers your intelligence.
Okay.
It lowers your intelligence.
But I don't think, and I'm going to interject here, and I'm going to let you get back to it, but what your son did was exactly right when he put his hands on the dashboard. That's called a plan.
Oh,
And
yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. I'm
and
talking about the 15-year-old.
Right, and again, I would hope and I believe that 22-year-old will hopefully bring that plan to him.
Right.
And so that they both can move forward. But
Absolutely.
and that's that hope. And I truly believe that because you seem like that type of person that would ensure that that's happening. But that's called, you have to go into this with a plan. If you get stopped, you have to have a plan.
Right.
Don't go into it with fear because you may end up dead because your fear is now taking over. You have to think through this whole piece. It's unfortunate that we have to do that.
Right.
But the solution is when you go into this, you have to have a plan, right? When you go out, have a plan. If this happens, if you get stopped, hey, this is what I'm going to
And
do.
it's funny because it never happens on a stopwatch. I've told this story several times, and because I've been stopped by police, either in my car or walking out of a dollar store. And to me, that was the scariest thing I've ever had to face. But the time when I was pulled over, I got my wallet, I got my ID out, and I got my hands on the steering wheel. I didn't put them on the dash, but I got them up so they can see them, right? And so when they came out, I just handed it to them out the window. That was it. Then the conversation started from where it was going from there. So most of the time, 90%, 99.99% of the time, it was okay. When I came out of that store, that dollar store, and tell the story, it's a different scenario. Because I had no idea. I'm thinking of walking right to my car, get in the car and leave, right?
Sure.
I had my keys in my hand, and my phone in my hand, the yellow bag, Dollar General store. And I had, as soon as I walk out, and when I heard them cops yelling at me, I didn't know they was talking because the woman behind me, they told her to step back in. And they told me to come out, drop everything in your hands. And I just dropped it. But I keep thinking, we keep thinking, not trying to think the alternate or the negative, but what if I just switched in the wrong way? Or raised my phone up saying, hey, why are you guys stopping me? 3 cops had their guns pointed at me, and I dropped everything. And they told me to back up against the wall. Then they started coming in. I saw them slowly putting their guns in their holsters. Then they asked my ID. I said it was in my back pocket. They reached out and got it. They ran my name and everything was fine. But then afterwards, I'm shaking up right now. Afterwards, they picked my stuff up and handed it to me and said, well, you appear to be like a suspect that just robbed a place down the road. So I was just a suspect. But had I not, now I didn't have a plan. I swear to God, I did not have a plan. I had a reaction. My reaction was that emotionally I can't react. I got to just comply, be completely compliant. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen, where people still get killed when they are compliant.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because their job really is to de-escalate a situation when it becomes even better than I would.
That's
But
right.
I think it's my responsibility too.
So let's talk about that, and we can talk about the counter demonstrations.
Right.
And so how did they work? Did they just willy-nilly say, we're going to go into this, drugstore, we're going to sit at the counter? No, they had drills, right? And they sat, and that's what we have to do for our kids,
Right.
is to say, okay, here's the situation, here's the scenario, and you have to continuously do it.
So let me ask you, is that, you being an educator, right?
Mhm.
And I think you teach all boys now, right?
I teach all girls.
All girls? Okay.
Yes.
I knew it was one of them.
Yes.
So, but do you feel it's necessary that be part of the curriculum? Meaning, because we're in a new age now.
Mm-hmm.
When I was young, I was telling Patricia this earlier. I was young when the police officers would come to the school, elementary schools.
Mm-hmm.
They were called officer friendlies. So the perception on mine that everybody would see in uniform is friendly.
Right.
And they would come in and they wouldn't be standing up. They would sit down with us
Mhm.
and just have open dialogue. We can
Right.
answer whatever questions. Well, how long does it take to be a cop?
Right.
Just stuff the elementary child would ask. And then they would interact with the school.
Right.
I mean, they had basketball teams.
Mhm.
They come and play with some of the kids playing basketball.
Right.
They had march. They had a band, not march. They had a band
Mhm.
that came in and played for us.
Right.
I mean, these were things that is going back to this thing called community policing. Most
Yes.
major city has those policies in place, but
Correct.
there's a lot of stuff happening within the city.
Sure.
But do you feel that something can be taught or be part of the curriculum in today's school system?
Absolutely.
So they can get back to that basic.
Absolutely. So to speak to that, in Texas we have our what we call RSOs, right, and those are our relation, officers. Basically, like I said, we have City of Grand Prairie, and I know them very well. We have a great conversation. We talk about safety, being former military and things like that, and I know weapons, so we've talked about that.
Right.
And she's an African American female, so there's a different type of relationship that's there. But I've always introduced myself to our RSOs. I've always tried to, talk to them and communicate with them and get their mindset. I think what's interesting is that in Minneapolis here recently, that the Minneapolis School District has severed ties with the Minneapolis Police Department. So they no longer have their RSOs because what they said, and I'm paraphrasing the quote, but they do not have the values that we do. And that's what the school district is saying. And so they've been in the schools since, I believe it was 1967, right, in Minneapolis. And there was a stint
Who
between...
made that decision then?
Who made that decision? Or-
Seven those times, or was it just something? that
The
happened?
school board.
Oh.
The school board has to make that decision for that school district. So with the
Several times
superintendent...
with the local officers.
Yes. And so they are no longer... So that was a $1.1 million contract annually.
Was that a smart move?
Well, that's the question.
Okay.
And that's really the question, because they were still having issues within their schools. The problem or the issue that was going on was that they were noticing that RSOs were targeting African American students and students of color.
I see.
And so once this George Floyd thing happened, right, the murder of George Floyd, now it's, okay, look, we have to do something as a school district.
Right.
And so that was their answer.
What city was that the other guy was killed?
Which one? Oh, Philando
Philando
Castile.
Same city.
Same city, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Same
And I think it was like
same police department.
maybe it was a suburb, but it was definitely within those confines.
Wow.
And so when you start putting those things in perspective and looking at that again as an educator and as a researcher, and that's why I believe it's so important that we go and do our research and do the actual findings and find out what's happening.
Right.
There was a time, and it's still kind of there, where there were a lot of school shootings, and they were going to arm teachers.
Right.
Now,
I heard that in Atlanta.
Now here's an issue that there are some teachers that don't believe Black Lives Matter should be there, or whatever the case may be. So now you're possibly arming them. Not to open a can of worms, but we really have to look at what the solution is for not only our community, but how we interact with other communities.
Okay.
Right? And for me, again, it's going through those drills. Like you do a fire drill at school, we do, active shooter at school. Yes, you're going to have to do those drills at home.
Right. Well.
I wanted to finish my thought on...
Sorry about that.
You good. On the... I was talking about imagery just a moment ago. On like I said, it's just an overabundance of imagery within the Black community that keeps us perpetuating this mindset. And of course, some of it definitely has its merits.
Right.
But as far as a solution, if we're just focusing on solutions, it's like, well, first off, we have to know that there's another side of this that we can exist on in the first place. Most people just only know survival. Most people just only know to live in fear. Not most people. A lot of people just only know to live this way and react this way,
Right.
so they do that.
Yeah.
And so they just perpetuate and manifest whatever it is that they have in their subconscious. So if you put imagery within your son that shows these, champion quality intellectual blacks.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, well, this is the way that such and such overcame this situation, and this is the way that such and such responded to this challenging situation. Just like you were mentioning, okay, well, you have these classes where you teach these people how to respond to conflict,
Right.
and how to respond to challenge, as opposed to
conflict resolution.
exactly. And this applies on so many levels. Just on an individual level, a lot of people just on an individual level have built an image of themselves that once life hits them, they don't even know how to adjust.
Right.
And this is where you
Right.
have all the mental illnesses, and you have depression, and because my world doesn't look the way that I thought it would. And so addressing your own personal imbalances within the way that you react and respond and interact with your emotions is a huge opportunity point. For blacks, or for the black population, we have a lot of trauma that we still have to deal with.
Right.
And so we spend a lot of time frustrated with other people not acknowledging all of this suffering that we've gone through,
Right.
while we aren't addressing it ourselves internally.
Right.
And so with anybody, 15-year-old son, 22-year-old son, 1-year-old son, whoever it is, that can be affected by what's going on today, is look, life has a spectrum that we exist on.
Right.
Just like there's great over here, there is the exact opposite
Right.
over here.
Absolutely.
And so based on these universal laws, the way that you respond will dictate where you stand, respond regularly, will dictate where you exist on the spectrum of humanity.
Right.
And so if your behavior, I actually came up with this company that I'm developing. It just came up.
It's a mock company?
It's a mock company.
Okay.
It's called Overth Incorporated, or Overth Inc. for short, because I think too much. And it's based off of it's a massive entity that everybody is subscribed to and doesn't know it. Okay? And so the way that it works is we have agents. We have agents that take your circumstance, your environment, your past experiences, and these agents are called internal dialogue engineering agents. And so based off of your circumstance, your environment, your experiences, these internal dialogue engineering agents will put together a package of internal dialogue to give to you that you can respond to with putting your attention into it.
Right.
And so if I'm looking at XYZ, post on World Star and seeing some black dude getting stomped out by the cops, that is a package that's going to give me an internal dialogue that I can click yes on and say, oh, well, I wish somebody would try to do that to me, blah, blah, blah. And you start conjuring up these other images. All of those internal dialogue engineering agents are there to give you ideas to act on. And
So that sounds like AI.
That's not AI.
Well, it's studying your behavior and when things happen, because every time you're exposed to a certain situation, your reaction to it again is different. The first time you're shocked and awe by a situation. Now, like if I got pulled over by the police again, my reaction may not be as internally stressful if I was pulled over the same way I was before, because I've been through it before. You know what I mean? So now that I've received that data, or my response, and all these things that are happening, all these emotions that was going on, and all that stuff is happening, I'm a different person because of it. Now, I can't say I'm a different personality, but when that type of thing happens again, just like a person's dealing with trauma. Now, the trauma when a person is blocked, when they blocked out other senses, other parts of their being because they went through this particular trauma, and they just don't function the same as in a negative way, then that's where there's a problem. But for the average person that's not traumatized, now I wasn't traumatized by that, but I was scared as hell. That was a moment. Eventually I got over it. But had I been traumatized, like I said, it's a different situation. But because I've gone through it, if it happens again, that same exact scenario, my response would be a little bit more calmer internally. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So we've gone through. So it is kind of AI to a certain extent. But look, we just ran out of time. And, I want to thank all of you guys for being a part of this discussion. And going back to the actual topic of the show with Bridging the Gap, this is the only way that I can think of to start the process of bridging the gap is talking, communication, having proper dialogue. If you have nobody in your household that you can talk to, go find someone else you can talk to, but definitely talk about it because we all dealing with a bunch of anxiety. And this anxiety probably could be treated a little bit by having a conversation with someone who at least listens. And I think that's what we need to do, the purpose of these podcasts, so we can talk. These conversations are controlled, but they're not completely structured. You know what I'm saying? So everyone here on these shows are free to talk. But I think it's important to have it. You didn't pick up a lot of sound bites. I got a job for you after this show anyway that you're going to do with this particular show, but I'll tell you when it's over. But something we talked about, before you got here. But anyway, so I want to thank all of you guys for being here. Next week we have another show on Sunday, every Sunday now. We the People, we have 3 more special guests. Topics, I'm not going to go into discussions right now, but it might change between now and then. But it's going to be a great show. I want to thank Africa, Jabari, Josh for actually participating in this discussion. It's been an hour and a half long. So, second one in a week. So, thank you guys, and we will see you again next week.